You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
That would suck indeed, so I will not drop the mic. Figuratively maybe, but not literally. Welcome into Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham. Today we have a fantastic, yet shortened podcast. Why? Because I have a flight to catch to Houston, where the Final Four is. So, should be awesome. I'm actually super excited. I'm going to go to the Final Four, and I got to get on a plane here in the next little bit. So this will be a quick one. But I couldn't leave without posting publicly my predictions for this Final Four. So we're going to jump right to it. We've had two amazing weekends of basketball, and we've got one more left. We've got this Saturday, and then I guess technically the championship isn't on a weekend. It's on Monday. But if you're not excited for this Final Four, something is wrong with you and you're not a real basketball fan. How awesome has this tournament been? It's been truly one of the best tournaments I can remember. Kansas went down this last week to Villanova. Villanova's good. Villanova's really good. People forget Villanova was ranked number 1 in the country for several weeks this season. They're no slouch, and here they are in the Final Four. And then, of course, who would have predicted Syracuse would get this far, other than, the Orange Homers? I look at the ESPN Tournament Challenge thing, and all the people at the top of the list now are, of course, their usernames are things like Orange Crush and things like that. So I'm not sure if you can really consider yourself like ultra smart and pat yourself on the back for being such an intelligent predictor of games, when in reality all that you did was pick your homer team to go to the Final Four, which was completely unrealistic when you did it. You probably laughed with your buddies and said, "Haha, look, I put Syracuse in the Final Four," and now they made it. So kudos to you guys that put them there. I don't think anyone actually thought they would get there, including Jim Boeheim himself. But the Orange Men are in the Final Four, and I tell you what, they're looking dangerous. And it's their matchup with North Carolina. That's not even a tournament game. That's a conference game. I mean, anything can happen in conference games. Everybody knows when you're familiar with a team, when you're familiar with a program, and you're familiar with the coaches and the players, and you've played them, and it's different than just watching film and prepping for somebody for a couple of days. It's a team that you've already faced several times. If you're a junior, senior, you've seen them many times. The coaches have seen each other many times. The preparation is entirely different for a conference game than it is for an opponent in the NCAA tournament, usually, that you've never faced before, certainly not that season. So I'm a big fan of trying to keep the conferences from running into each other, and unless they both, make it to the Sweet 16 type of thing. I think it's good to spread them out to avoid those types of matchups. But the ACC is just too good. They really are. They're just too good. I mean, the ACC had 6 teams in the Sweet 16. They had 4 in the Elite 8, all of which were on the same side of the bracket. So it was an all ACC lineup there on the right side of your bracket, which meant 2 of them had to go home. And so 2 of them, of course, move on. And that's Syracuse and North Carolina. Now one of them's guaranteed to be in the championship game. And it's just crazy how good the ACC is. So I think North Carolina will win that game. I predicted them to win it all, a couple weeks ago. And they're still holding strong, thank goodness for me in my bracket. But I would not be surprised if the Orange continue to pull it off. I don't think they will, but I'm just saying in a conference game, you just can't. You should expect the unexpected a little bit. I mean, nobody thinks that Syracuse is a better team than Virginia. Nobody thinks that. But because they beat them and they were better that night, to get to the Final Four, here they are, and then they deserve it, honestly. It's the team that nobody thought belonged in the Final Four or in the tournament at all. And here they are in the Final Four. I mean, I just think that's the coolest story. I love that kind of stuff. And because it's Syracuse, we're not really thinking of it as like this Cinderella story. It's not like VCU making the Final Four or George Mason. Because, it's Jim Boeheim, it's Syracuse. They won a national championship a decade or so ago with Carmelo Anthony, 12 years ago, whatever it was. And, they've been to several Final Fours. Nobody looks at Syracuse as a Cinderella. But this season, they really, truly are. I mean, they were a team that didn't even have 20 wins going into the tournament. They were by far the most criticized team who got into the tournament. The committee was criticized the most for putting them into the tournament above any other team that got in. And they're in the Final Four, and they just beat the 1 seed in their region, Virginia. So kudos to Jim Boeheim, kudos to Syracuse. They're there. I think they deserve it. I'm looking at our STB Sports Take Tournament Challenge on ESPN. I am currently in second place, which, I'm pretty proud of that. That's kind of cool. First place is someone named M. Woodman. So whoever that is, congratulations. You're 20 points ahead of me, and you are going to beat me because we have the same remaining bracket. We only have 480 total possible points remaining. So I will not get first place. I'm in second place. Phil Hyatt, though, is in third. He's actually one of our producers who's helped us out with some research and whatnot. He's in third place, and he has 640 possible points remaining because he has UNC and Oklahoma in his championship. And the thing I want to point out about Phil's bracket, I want to give him a little pat on the back here. Phil actually had Villanova beating Kansas. He had that matchup. He had that in his Elite Eight over there. He had, actually, you know what? He didn't. He had UConn beating Kansas, which didn't happen. So he had UConn and Cal. So his top part of that was actually completely wrong. But it worked out to his favor because Villanova in the end, got there anyway. So he had predicted, Kansas would get upset earlier than they did. But the end result was the same. He had Villanova beating Miami in the Elite Eight, and then Villanova moving on to the Final Four, which they did. So he actually got Villanova, Oklahoma, UNC all in his Final Four. Getting 3 out of 4 Final Four teams right is very impressive, especially this year. Nobody had Syracuse, again, unless you're like on campus over there or something. But Phil looks like he's likely the front runner to win because I do think that Oklahoma is going to win. We'll get into matchups a little bit later here, but Phil Hyatt in third place, looking poised to win the $50 gift card from kzgear.com for the STB Sports Take Tournament Challenge. We had a total of, I think there was 17 or 18 people that entered. Kind of a cool thing. We do have someone by the name of Sun Power for Life. They have Oklahoma winning it all, so they have 480 possible points remaining, but the rest of their Final Four is gone. Jesse has UNC winning it all with 640 points remaining, so that actually could see a huge bump up there because Jesse, let's see who Jesse had in their championship. They also had UNC Oklahoma, so they had Maryland in their Final Four. That did not happen, and Purdue. Bold picks, just not the best ones. But Oklahoma, UNC, anyone that picked that, I think you are sitting pretty. So that's a little update on our tournament challenge, STB Sports Take. The second chance one, not many people jumped on board with that one. There's only a handful of people in it. In fact, let's look it up real quick. Let's see if we can find that. Go down to tournament challenge, second chance. Got it. Okay, so in our second chance bracket, STB Sports Take second chance. Yeah, we just had a handful of people, and it looks like everyone's champion is already out. There's Vikings 648 and Shrammy-Cito 21 with 160 possible points remaining, which means one of them probably has UNC in the championship. Yeah, they had Kansas beating North Carolina. And then the other one, that was Shrammy-Cito 21, and then Vikings also had Kansas beating UNC. So somebody there will tie, and that's just a fun little second chance thing. I like the second chance. I don't know what you guys thought of it. Not many people jumped on board with the second chance bracket, not here on Simply the Best Sports Podcast or amongst just my friends that I do this with. It didn't seem to strike the same chord with the other people that it did with me. I thought it was an awesome idea. I'm super stoked that ESPN offered it. And I think it added that much more to the second weekend and beyond because it's like, hey, you know what? Okay, we got the Michigan State upset out of the way. We've seen all these teams play 2 games each. We're seeing the games, or at least the highlights. we're looking at the final score, we're seeing what's happening, we're listening to analysis. Everyone's much more involved, and so you start to learn more about teams like a Stephen F. Austin than you knew before the tournament started, when you're just kind of guessing a little bit on some of these games or looking at RPI, BPI, stuff like that. So I actually really, really like the second chance bracket, and I'm going to push hard next year to get more people to be part of it, because I think the playing field kind of levels out once the Sweet 16 hits, and I think it's really fun to see what people predict after they've got that first weekend and a few games under their belt. So that was the second chance bracket. I do want to talk though about my tournament challenge pool with my friends. We all put in $100 each as a participation fee, not gambling. So our registration fee amongst ourselves was $100 to be part of the participation of the tournament challenge. And we decided that we would allocate $1,330 to first place for that tournament challenge. And yours truly is currently in second place, but I'm the only one of the 19 of us to have picked North Carolina to win it all, which means if North Carolina wins it all, I will leapfrog the guy in front of me who has Kansas picked to win it all, and I'll get first place. So I am going to be at the Final Four, and I will be a very big Tar Heels fan. For one, I kind of always have been just because I'm a Michael Jordan guy. BYU is my first love with college. That's where I went. I'm a BYU alum. But North Carolina has always been kind of my other team that I've cheered for in college sports, especially in basketball, just because I was such a huge Michael Jordan fan growing up. So we'll see if the Tar Heels can pull through, but what a crazy, crazy tournament it's been. It's just been so much fun, and now we've got these great matchups. We've got the ACC matchup we talked about, and on the other side, we haven't even talked about this yet. We've got two number 2 seeds in Villanova and Oklahoma, and honestly, I truly think that both of those teams could have been number 1s. Oregon certainly didn't look like a number 1 to me in this tournament. Oklahoma looked like the far stronger team throughout, in my opinion. I mean, you look at Oklahoma's, the first 2 rounds, Oklahoma was a little bit shaky. They won just by 14 in the first round against, their lowly 15 seed over there. And then they go on and they play VCU, the 10 seed, and they only win by 4. And so they kind of looked a little shaky in that first weekend. But I'm telling you, that first weekend is just crazy because the teams and the coaching staff, they're in the same position we are, really. Like, they've never even heard of the team they're going up against half the time. They've never seen them play. They've never looked at a box score. And so they just, boom, immediately have to hop to it. But once you've been in that tournament and seen a couple of things for a couple of games, once the Sweet 16 hits, you definitely see the upsets start to drop off. And that, for the most part, held true this tournament as well. But yeah, so Oklahoma beats VCU by 4. But then they get to their tough games. They play Texas A&M, the 3 seed, and they beat them by 14. Then they play Oregon, the 1 seed, and they beat them by 12. And so Oklahoma's looked really, really strong as the 2 seed coming up out of the West. And then if you look over at Villanova, who came out of the South, their first round, again, they're also the 2 seed. So their first round, they won by 30 points in the first round over the 15. Then they played Iowa, the 7, in the second round, and they beat them by 19. Then they played Miami, the 3 seed in the Sweet 16, and they beat them by 23. I mean, they have just steamrolled their way into the Elite 8. And then they played Kansas, and they beat Kansas by 5, who was the number 1 overall seed. So Villanova looks really, really good. In fact, Villanova, I mean, if you just go off of, the path we just went through, you got to think Villanova's, going to win this game. But then you remember that Oklahoma has Buddy Hield. And Buddy Hield is playing out of his mind right now. That guy is absolutely making himself more and more money every single game. I mean, his trajectory in the NBA draft has got to be just increasing dramatically with every passing game because, in my opinion, if I'm an NBA scout, and I've always been kind of this way, if I'm an NBA scout and I'm looking at potential players to draft, you've got your Ben Simmons, who's this freshman phenom into LSU, but they didn't even make the tournament, so we're not seeing him play at this higher level. This is a higher level of basketball on the collegiate level. It's win or go home. It's winner take all, and nobody wants it more in any sport than these college basketball players do in this tournament. It means everything to them, and there's no margin for error. If you lose, you're done. And ask the Michigan State Spartans about that. You cannot make mistakes, or a dream season can be shattered, right? So you look at like this, the level and the quality of play in this tournament, and you see guys like Buddy Hield just rising to the occasion. And if I'm an NBA scout, that's what I want. That's what I want. I want to see guys that can rise to the occasion. I want to see guys that can take their team to the tournament and then carry them in the tournament. Stephen Curry did that at Davidson. Stephen Curry averaged like 40 points a game to get Davidson into the Elite Eight. Nobody had heard of Davidson before that tournament. Nobody knew who Davidson was. Nobody knew. I mean, maybe you'd heard of the school, maybe. But Stephen Curry put them on the map. I mean, Stephen Curry pretty much got his little brother to go to Duke because he did so well. Stephen did so well in the NCAA tournament at Davidson that it got his brother some more looks. I mean, obviously their dad, Dell, he was an NBA player for years. But I'm telling you, if you can have a player that carries his team in the NCAA tournament, that says a lot about that player. And Stephen Curry is a prime example. Another guy I remember just being, growing up in Utah was Andre Miller. Andre Miller was a guy, everybody knew he was going to the league. He was a fantastic player with the Utes. He was kind of in the shadow of Keith Van Horn until Keith Van Horn graduated. And Andre Miller was the clear-cut leader of the running Utes his senior year. And that was the year that the Utes made a run all the way to the national championship. And Andre Miller, I mean, I'm not a Utah fan because I'm a BYU fan. I try to be within the podcast, within my blog, I've tried very, very hard to be, diplomatic about things. But I'm definitely a BYU fan, and Utah is of course their arch rival. But that season, I got to admit, I was so thoroughly impressed by Andre Miller. He played out of his mind, and he just played with so much heart and so much energy and leadership. And the guy was getting triple doubles. I mean, I still remember when this was in the 98 season, and they make a run to the Final Four, and they're going up against North Carolina in the Final Four, and nobody thought they could do it. They had just beaten Arizona with Mike Bibby and Miles Simon, and that was like crazy. Nobody thought they had a chance in that game, and they beat them handily. I don't have the box score in front of me, but I know that they beat them handily by 20 plus type of thing. And Rick Majerus, he was the head coach. Rick Majerus had introduced the triangle and two defense to the world, which he came up with supposedly on a napkin with George Karl in a restaurant. And they just blew the Wildcats out. And I think the Wildcats were actually defending national champs. And so they go on and play UNC, and nobody gives them a chance there, and they beat them. And Andre Miller they had Mike Doliak and Hano Medela. They had some good players, But Andre Miller was the guy, and it put him on the map. And he went on to play in the NBA for 50 years or something like that. I mean, I think he might still be in the NBA. I don't even know. But if he's not, he probably should be a head coach there, because the guy could play, and he wasn't really like that superstar college guy until that tournament. And he carried them. He had triple doubles. He was hitting the clutch shots. He was doing all these things. Buddy Hield's doing that. And I'm telling you, Buddy Hield, he's got a career in the NBA. That guy can play. I know he's not a freshman, and so it's not as cool, in these scouts' minds. They're thinking like, oh, well, I mean, gosh, like Ben Simmons, he's only 19. Like, look what he can do. He can jump so high. He can run so fast. And I get that that's, you got to draft on potential in a lot of cases, but Buddy Hield's like a proven commodity, in my opinion. Maybe they think, his ceiling is lower because he is a proven commodity. He's had 4 years, and that's as high as he's going to go, but I don't think so. I think we're going to see Buddy Hield go to the NBA and be there for a long, long time. He can really play, and he, to me, is the difference maker. I think Villanova has proven that they are a phenomenal team, a team that Oklahoma should be scared to death of, actually. But Buddy Hield, I think, will be the difference maker in that game. And when you have a superstar, basketball's a sport where a superstar can carry a team. Look at Stephen Curry and Davidson, and now Stephen Curry and the Warriors. Oh, the Warriors are phenomenal all around. But I'm telling you, you take Steph Curry off the Warriors, They've lost probably 25 games this year instead of 7. And I mean that. I think they lose at least 15 more games if he's not a part of that team. Probably even more, actually. So superstars can carry teams. You look at what Michael Jordan did with the Bulls. Sure, he had great teammates around him. Scottie Pippen's an all-time great. We've talked about that. Dennis Rodman. I mean, Horace Grant, Luke Longley, I could go on and on. They had, Tony Kukoc. They had great players. Steve Kerr, who's the coach of the Warriors now. In fact, we're going to sidetrack, little note here. We're going to do a podcast on the 2016 Warriors versus the 96 Bulls. It's pretty inevitable at this point that the Bulls' record is going down. The Jazz had a chance last night, took the Warriors to overtime. Gosh, you really wish that the Jazz could have pulled that one off, don't you? I mean, it would have been so cool to see that 8th loss come to the Warriors at the hands of the Utah Jazz. But didn't happen. Warriors dominated the overtime, and they moved one game closer to breaking that record that the Bulls set in the 95-96 season with Jordan and Pippen and Rodman and Phil Jackson as coach and Ron Harper, Steve Kerr. That was a fantastic team. Holy cow, that team was good. But the Warriors are going to beat it. So we're going to do a podcast kind of comparing those two teams because the record is going to be broken. And call me a Jordan homer, call me a Bulls homer, call me the 90s was a tougher, era homer, whatever you want to say. But I honestly think the Bulls team would destroy that Warriors team. And I'll break it down in a later podcast, probably in a couple weeks once the season's over for the NBA. But I really think, I think of Scottie Pippen guarding Steph Curry or, Klay Thompson. I truthfully think that Scottie Pippen could keep Klay Thompson from even touching the ball. I really don't even hesitate to say that. I think that his defense would be so smothering on Klay Thompson, he'd be taken completely out of the game. And if I'm taking Draymond Green or Rodman, I'm taking Rodman. Rodman was able to take the mailman, Karl Malone, out of his game. He's not going to have any problems with a guy like Draymond Green. So then it's like, okay, maybe Steph Curry goes off for 35, 40, and maybe Steph Curry averages 35 a game with, a guy like Ron Harper guarding him. That's fine. Let him do that, I don't see Harrison Barnes doing much. Maybe you put MJ on him. Maybe MJ takes a stab at MJ was a phenomenal defender. So maybe you put Pippen on Curry, Jordan on Klay Thompson. I'm getting way off track. We're going to save this one. We'll save that for another podcast. But the Warriors one step closer. But getting back to the Buddy Hield thing, he's making himself money. He's getting so much attention right now in this NCAA tournament, and it's the highest level of college basketball. You can't get any higher than this tournament. The stakes are never higher, the competition's never better, and he's proven to get even stronger and stronger. So, in my opinion, Buddy Hield is the player of the tournament. He's the player of the year, and I think he'll go. Probably I think he'll be a lottery pick now in the NBA draft, and I think he'll have a career that's successful in the NBA, barring injury, which you never wish upon anyone. So my predictions for this Final Four are Oklahoma wins a close one over Villanova, and I'm going to say that UNC beats Syracuse, but I'm going to predict that one's not quite as close. I'm going to say it's probably decided with about 2 minutes to go type of thing. I don't think it's going to be the thing where there's a lot of free throws and nail biting at the end with the North Carolina-Syracuse matchup. But I do see that happening with the Villanova-Oklahoma matchup. I think it's going to come right down to the wire. And I think we're going to see that Buddy Hield's the difference. I do. I think we'll see that he's going to hit some big shots and some backbreaker type shots, and I think Oklahoma will win that game. Then in the championship, Oklahoma versus North Carolina, that will be an awesome, awesome show. I'm hoping to go to that game as well. We'll have to play that by ear once I get down there. But I'm going to say that North Carolina wins that game, and I think North Carolina cuts down the nets in Houston, and they get another championship. Roy Williams, so that'll be his third. So I'm taking the North Carolina Tar Heels still to win it all. Happy with my prediction from a few weeks ago, hoping it can hold true. We'll recap it all when I get back, tell you about my experience, and I want to talk about, we said that we would do our own Sweet 16 from all of the champions of this century, from 2000 until now, with the North Carolina or whoever wins this Final Four. We will have 17 champions, So we're going to break them all down, and we'll kind of tell you who we think would be the best overall from the original 16, and then where North Carolina stacks up against them. Other upcoming podcasts, of course, will be the Warriors-Bulls thing, but one thing I want to mention before we sign off here is how crazy is this D'Angelo Russell-Nick Young thing? I mean, talk about stupidity. I mean, the Lakers just couldn't look any dumber right now. They're already just in a complete tailspin. They got blown out by the Jazz by 48 points, worst loss in Laker history, tied for the worst ever. Worst loss of Kobe Bryant's career, and it happened right here in Utah. And then to add to that, they're having like their worst season ever, and now they've got D'Angelo Russell, this 19-year-old kid, who's a very talented basketball player, secretly records a teammate as the teammate's basically confessing or talking about cheating on his fiancée, who's a famous Australian rapper, Iggy Azalea, and then somehow it gets released to the public. It's like, how dumb can you be as a teammate? I mean, I'm not in any way condoning, cheating on your girlfriend or spouse or fiancé or anything like that, but I do think there needs to be lines that are drawn on like what friends and teammates do, and friends and teammates absolutely do not secretly record conversations and then leak it to the public. I mean, that's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of. So the Lakers are in complete disarray right now. That's kind of fun to watch a little bit, isn't it? I mean, unless you're from LA and you're a Laker fan, it's kind of actually like nice to see them struggling. I mean, we've been envious of them for decades. It's like they've never really gone through struggles. I mean, a little bit, but even, they're winning with Magic and Kareem and Worthy. And then they're like, kind of so-so, and they're making, they go through some lulls, and then but then they're a playoff team for years, and then they get Shaq and Kobe, and they win a bunch more championships, and then they're, and then they're still back in the playoffs, and so it's kind of nice to see them struggle. I'm sure they'll be back. They're Los Angeles. They're the Lakers. They'll be one of the top teams in the league again within the next 5 years, I'm sure, but not this year. So kind of funny to watch, but yeah, Nick Young, D'Angelo Russell, really, really kind of a boneheaded move on both of their parts, but especially to make it so public. That's just not the type of thing that anyone wants public, So that was kind of a weird, dumb move by D'Angelo Russell. But that's all the time we have for today's podcast. Check us out online, stbsportstake.com. Check me out on Twitter at Sean Bingham, SeanBingham. We also have an Instagram, which I have not talked about much. It's actually, we're going to change the name at some point, but right now we've got a pretty strong following. I don't want to confuse. The Instagram name is Wall of Sports. Wall like a wall in your bedroom, or John Wall. WALL, Wall of Sports. So you check us out on Instagram, check me out on Twitter. We want to hear your feedback. So if you're listening on iTunes or on SoundCloud, subscribe. Hit that subscribe, hit that follow button, give us a rating, and tell us how we're doing. Love you guys. You're awesome. I love doing this podcast. Hope to bring you many, many more. Promise to bring you many, many more. But that's it for today. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out stbsportstake.com. Simply the best in sports. 'Cause we are